All right, folks. Oh, that's loud. Sorry about that. Turns out I was still projecting even though I had a microphone in front of my face. The talk today is using compliance to quarantine, remove the risk, and rebuild clean. I'm Galen Emery. I work at Chef. Hopefully this is what you're intending to get to. If not, I hope you listen to me for the next, hopefully no more than 20 minutes. But it'll actually probably be a lot less than that since I tend to talk pretty fast. So real quick, who am I? I'm Galen, the kid Emery. If you want to know the kid's story, go find Chris Nimmer. He's the federal sales director I work with. We had a fun email where after a meeting, someone called me a kid. I was like, I know I got the baby face going on, but like I've been doing this for a while. I work on Fed Island. Fed Island is a wonderful place. If you'd like to join me on Fed Island, please come join. Please. In the chef world, Fed Island for us is the Department of Defense, civilian agencies, and the intelligence community. I work with all three of them. If you work for a larger organization, those are often split up into things. My basic charter is I help people understand how to build and structure their systems and culture to solve their velocity problems, right? That's what I do at Chef. I do as part of a greater team over here at Chef, all that fun stuff. I live in San Diego. I know those of you who are like, wait, Fed, San Diego, why aren't you in DC? Well, because DC is hot and muggy, and San Diego is nice and sandy and beachy and has lots of good tacos. So that's why I live in San Diego. Also, my fiance is in grad school. That's another good reason to live in San Diego. And I joined Chef a little over 4 years ago in March of 2014 on the solution architect team. So before we start talking about quarantine and rebuilding, let's talk a little bit about trust and what we think about, what we mean when we see trust. And you're going to see a few more Creative Commons licensed images here. That's an image for trust there. But when we talk about trust, what are we thinking about when we think about if we trust our systems? How do we decide that we trust the system, right? And what does that mean? And so what I'm talking about here is really this idea of if I have a system, I trust that I know the state of the system, or I trust I know what can happen on that system, what changes can happen to that system. And that's an important concept as we deal with high security environments, high security workloads. One of the key components of this is the idea of least privilege, right? People should not be able to log into a system that they don't have access to. People shouldn't be able to do things on a system they shouldn't have access to do, right? But so that's what we do. We enforce the trust by putting in least privilege. I'm sure many of you operate in environments where when you go to log into a box and you're like, I want to go run this command, like, oh, nope, you got to be sudo. Like, okay, I'll sudo for the command. Oh, nope, that's not in your allowed commands list. Haha, enjoy, right? And so it's that process, that structure that we've enforced in our systems. That's actually one of the reasons that Chef exists as an idea, right? Chef Client actually kind of changes that model a little bit and says, rather than enforce the trust on the box, rather than say, on the system, I'm going to tell you what commands you can and can't do, I'm going to put together some code that tells me what the system should look like. And when I build a system with that code, it's going to look that way every single time. And the tool that's going to run it is Chef, and Chef is going to have a lot of permissions, but I'm going to restrict who can make changes to what that policy is, right? We put in CI/CD pipelines in front of our code, we put in code review, we put in all these components for that thing. But oftentimes, and most of the time really, we don't remove that SSH trust, right? We don't remove that ability for somebody to go into the box and make a change. And as a result, sometimes our trust gets broken, right? This is a great example I pulled from how to not lock up your bike, right? And what we're finding here is there's two things. One is that the thing you wanted, your bike to be safe, your system to be secure, is not true anymore, right? And it's both your fault for not securing things properly and the fault of whoever might have made the insecure thing, right? And most of the time, the thing we're talking about here is not malicious, right? Like most of our users are not maliciously making bad commands in our systems. There is that fear that it might happen, and there's a lot of things we can talk about culturally about that and how that all operates. But at a high level, what we're saying is, if something happens on the box that I wasn't expecting, as in someone ran a command, did a thing that broke my trust, broke the posture of my system, do I still trust that system after that event? Right? We've seen a lot of things in terms of Chef. We saw on the main stage yesterday Chef Client and Inspect being used to automatically fix a problem that somebody caused in the system. And that's really powerful. It's a really great thing. But my question is, do I even trust the system once that happens? Once the trust has been broken, is it now tainted? Is it now a thing that I don't want to touch anymore? And so that's the idea of this talk. And the idea here is some automation. We'll rub some 4.0 on it. By the way, there's a bunch of photos of that guy in the finger with a bunch of other like tech things in front of it. So I highly recommend you find that for your own talks. It's quite awesome. But what I really want to do is say, go back to the trust. Engineers should act on our code, which we have no idea what we're doing. That's totally fine. But we're going to act on the code, and that code is going to act on systems for us, right? We're going to do things automatically for us. And one of the things we're going to do is we're going to be self-healing. We're going to be resilient, right? So when a thing happens inside of our infrastructure, it's going to automatically fix itself. I don't have to think about that on a day-to-day operations perspective. Because if I have to react to every single one of my systems that fails compliance, I'm going to spend my entire day and then some just reacting to systems. So what I'm going to do is show how we can make this happen with a combination of Chef and Inspec and a little bit of hand-waving magic. So the first thing is the environment I have is running in Chef, and this is going to be a little fun to do one-handed, but we'll figure this out. All right, and let me make that smaller. All right, so what I have here is Chef Automate. This is Chef Automate 2.0. It's not a whole lot different except from 1.0, except for the fact that it's quite different in every way possible. And here's my compliance status. I have a couple systems in here, and actually, to talk about that real quick, I have 3 systems running behind an ELB, running up in Amazon. If I come here, I want to come here to my ELB. Here's my 3 instances. Let's go ahead and refresh this, show that we're all in service right now. We've got 3 boxes we're working with. Okay. And so what I have here is my systems, and they are all, at least the current ones, are all compliant. If I come here, I can see that they're passing my baseline profile. They're doing all the things they're supposed to do. They are healthy systems from my point of view. So let's go ahead and let's make one of them unhealthy, and let's see what we can do, what happens. So the first thing I'm going to do is go and grab one of these systems. And I may just have to put the microphone down for some of this, but we'll see how far we can get one-handed. It's the airplane test, right? Like how much coding can you do on an airplane seat when you only use one hand at a time? All right, so we have here, let's go ahead and we will grab, whoops. Okay, I am very close to having to put this down. All right, let's go ahead and connect to this box. So I have a box here, and let's just do something to it real quick. Let's just install Telnet D. That sounds like a thing I want to do, right? We all love running Telnet servers in production, right? That's exactly the thing we're looking for. I'll go ahead and confirm that I want to do that. And so the whole point here is that it could be any change that happens on your system that your system says should not be true, right? You should not be running Telnet D in production. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run Chef Client. And I'm doing this in the demo just for the sake of time, just so that I don't have to sit here and wait for Chef Client to run in the background, nor do I have to trigger some other process to kick off. We're just going to make this happen. And in this case, all Chef Client's doing on this box is just running audit. That's all it's doing. And what I'm saying here is that I don't actually want Chef to fix this thing. I just want Inspec to tell me what the state of the system is. And again, it's important. Because it's just checking my baseline profile, I don't want to know if the baseline profile shifted on me. And so you're going to see all of a sudden I really don't have access to the system anymore. That's because some automation triggered, and we've got some things going on in the background. Right here, let's see here, is that timing correct? It looks correct to me. So this right here, I've got a compliance failure for the instance ID of the system that I was just on, and we've triggered some automation via some webhooks to make this thing happen. So let's go ahead and talk about what we did and where we did it. The first thing I did is if I come into Automate, and I come here to the little bell icon, I have a couple of notifications. I have a webhook that goes off to my listener. I also have a Splunk, Slack notification. I, of course, closed Slack for the purposes of not getting annoyed during the demo. So let's go reopen that and find that notification. And so what I'm doing here is I'm saying if the compliance profile has a failure, I am going to notify something that this has occurred. And I'm doing 2 things. One, I'm letting myself know in my channel for notifications. And I'm also saying that I'm going to go hit off the listener and have the listener do some other actions as well. We'll take a look at that in just a second. Come on, Slack. There we go. There we go. All right, so we have we have a critical failure here, and I can click on this and go see it in Automate. Huzzah! And I can see right here we've now failed 2 controls, Telnet and RSH server as well. So coming back here to this, let's go ahead and cancel this looking at things, and let's go ahead and look at the service.rb. Let's get into the right folder. Oh, come on. There we go. All right, so right here is a bunch of things in here. A lot of this is actually written by Kevin Reedy, who's in the background over there. There's some test things here, but down here in the bottom is where we actually have what we're looking for. And so what we're saying here is saying, hey, if we get a message type of compliance failure here, we're going to say we received it, and then we're going to quarantine a system. And all we're doing here is just talking to EC2 and saying, hey, what I want you to do is I want you to change the security group of that system. I no longer want you to give it the routes that I had before. And what I've actually done is I've just null routed it. I said, you're the security group. You have no routes to anything. We can go take a look at that. So I come back here, refresh. This is the instance ending in 5C9. Make this a little bit bigger. I think it might have actually already terminated by now. Yep, it's actually already killed itself. So it won't show me the security group, but the security group was null routed first. And then what's actually happening here as well is that if I refresh this page, this is my auto scaling group, and it's terminating the instance and rebuilding a new one and putting it behind my ELB for me. So what I've done is somebody made a change to a system. I didn't like that change, broke my security policy. My automation kicked off, null routed that system, and brought a new one back up into my pool all automatically for me. And so one of the things we can do, we can add into this is things like, maybe I want to save that box, right? Maybe I want to save an image of it and go figure out what went wrong before I terminate it. Or maybe I don't really want to terminate it. I want to move it somewhere else, right? But these are the kinds of decisions that you're going to sit about and think about and make decisions on in your environment, in your architecture. So it's a pretty quick talk, and this is pretty much it. But what other things might I do is I might relaunch everything else that system might have touched, right? If I'm really serious about this and I think about trust, I may not trust that entire VPC anymore. Any asset in there may be tainted or may be dirty to me, and I don't want to touch it anymore. One of the things I thought about when I was building this talk was, could I move a system into a new VPC? It turns out you can't without stopping it. But what you could actually do is you could just swap out your data set in your existing production with a fake data set, rebuild production on a new VPC, and all of a sudden you have an instant honeypot, right? You have the ability to, the attack itself creates the trap for the attacker, right? Which is a really cool idea that I definitely did not want to do in a 20-minute talk. And so some of the theories borrowed from Chaos Monkey, right? From Netflix, you must constantly test failure, right? This only works if your application is resilient to being taken down and being brought back online, right? That's a fundamental application principle you have to have in your application stacks for this to work as it goes on. So from there, that's pretty much it. Again, thanks to Rob Campbell, Andrew Dufour, and Kevin Reedy. They're the folks on my team who helped me out with this talk. The code will soon live here to build a bunch of these things, including some of the service RB stuff and things like that. And I know we have some time, so what questions can I answer? Yeah. So Jason's asking if we looked at which parameters are more serious than others, which failures are more serious, and parameterizing that, making decisions on that. The compliance failure notification that exists right now in Automate is, pretty straightforward. It's if it fails the check, it's a compliance failure, and we're going to send you a notification. Your automation on the back end, there's a whole lot of data in that report. We can definitely parse that out and make decisions on that, right? So you can say maybe the failure was a control that had impact score of 0, and I just want to notify you about this, and I don't actually want to do things, right? That's where the webhook and those decisions can be made. Yeah. So to modify the, so Reggie asked, what happens if the attacker escalates and goes to modify the inspect profile or things like that? There's a lot of what else we can get to on that path, right? But a couple of the things that are really important to know is that the profiles themselves are stored up in Automate, so they'd have to compromise the Automate server in order to change the profile itself there. You could potentially get into situations where people change the configuration. We're talking about a timing issue here in a lot of cases, right? Does someone have enough experience, enough knowledge to go figure out and kill out all your automation before things can happen? You're also at that point going to have a situation where, let's say, either they change, they can't change the profile, but they could potentially say, try to not run Chef or not run inspect. There's a couple ways to solve that problem. You can also run inspect remotely against a host. and if all of a sudden that stops working, then you have a problem there that you can also, again, those notifications also can come back into automate. There's a lot of ways to solve that particular problem of like what happens if someone gets on the box and does things. Lastly, let's say that they do get on the box, they do get control, they shut everything down, they lock you out of it, right? But somehow keep your application running and you're missing that. Automate will also show you any systems that are missing, right? So if the system goes missing, we can get notifications off of that, figure that thing out as well, and say, hey, this box has been missing for a while. What happened to it? Oh, I can't get to it. Okay, let's kill it, and like that may be a trust issue there as well. Yeah, so the question was if we thought about using AWS, the inspect AWS resources to look at AWS and do a similar thing. Yeah, you could absolutely do the same thing, right? Like it's the same idea of if the policy changed of any sort, basically, I no longer trust that the rules I had set have been followed on the system. Whether that system is an individual VM or a stack of systems or AWS environment, right? Security groups, VPCs. SSH keys, right? Like all those things could be true about that and do similar automation. Yeah, I think that makes total sense as well, right? To escalate this out of just the one instance into the wider overall view. Yeah, so Jeff is asking the question that I knew he would ask, and the whole corner next to him was happening that would be asking to ask. I think they're also the same group up at Chris Todd's talk not too long ago as well. The question is about how do we how quickly do we run inspect to catch this appropriately? Because I ran it manually, I just said let's go ahead and run it for the purposes of a demo. And there's a question here because there's actually two components to this, right? There is if you run Chef Client with the hardening profile, whatever that rule set is, in front with the audit cookbook, Chef Client will put the system back into state before inspect sees that anything changed, right? So what I actually advocate here is two sets of runs. You're going to have inspect running on a very fast interval, and the interval there is going to be slightly longer than it takes for your system to run your inspect profile. And if you're talking about just a STIG or if you're talking about a CIS profile, those can take many minutes to run. So maybe you're talking a 5, 10, 15-minute window. Hopefully not that long. I'd say 5 minutes is probably about the max that I really want this type of thing to be running on. If you've got a smaller profile set, if you're using the DevSec Linux baseline, or yours is pretty simple, pretty straightforward, a minute is a great time period to run inspect on. I think some people here run inspect just about every minute on their systems, and then have your Chef Client run on a much slower interval. That way, what happens is that Chef Client will come in, and it'll be very rare for somebody to make this type of change to the system and Chef Client fix it before it happens. We can also do things with using handlers and other things to actually catch those things as well. And I know that Jeff and I have talked about that in the past, but the other thing is maybe there are resources that the Chef Client manages that I want to know about in the same way, right? We can set up similar notifications and say, hey, guess what? If we change the permissions on Etsy Gshadow or Etsy Password, like, let's go do this same thing as well, right? That thing should not have changed on my box. I'm glad that Chef fixed it, but also let's get this box down and give me a new one because I don't trust it anymore. I don't know if anybody's done this auto quarantine type thing yet. I'm looking to see if I see any head nods in that corner. I'm not seeing any yet. So I don't know if the auto quarantine thing is happening just yet. I don't think anybody's put it into practice yet. I will say that the idea of using inspect to find out about the system state gets used a lot, right? It's all over the place. We're having plenty of good conversations about it and about profile status and profile system state recently at ChefConf. In particular, I think that it's not happening for the main reason like this thing is going to be hard to implement is you have to have an application that can support that kind of thing, right? And in places that actually care about trust and have this idea and have this thought, we often have a lot of applications that we didn't really build that in yet, right? And so that's going to be a component of this problem of how you solve it in the real world. Outside of that, I don't see any reason why people wouldn't use it, shouldn't use it, this idea. And again, the concept here is that I'm saying, I don't trust the system, I want to remove it, I want to do something with it. Whatever that is for you may be different than what it is for me, right? Maybe you're just going to pull it from the pool, and you'll go let it sit in the world, and you go figure it out and go figure out what's wrong. Maybe you're just going to get a notification on it. It's up to you. All right, I think we are at time. But if you have any more questions, I'll be around. Come up here, and we'll definitely have them. Thank you very much.